Hey gang, today we are looking at my directing reel. We talk so much about directing on this channel, I wanted to show you something that I have directed. If you actually look through my old videos, you might have already seen it, but I thought we'd break it down and do a little dissection of the shots in this particular video so you can kind of see where I'm coming from and some things that I personally have done. Before I do that though, I want to tell you a story, a cautionary tale. And hopefully by me telling you this story and something that I messed up on that can help you not do it yourself and you can avoid this later. So in this film, I decided to hire as my DP, my director of photography, one of my very good friends who'd been a videographer for 30 years. He did a lot of weddings and events. It was his main business. Plus, he had said he'd done TV and film stuff. I'd seen his wedding videography and I thought that he was pretty good. Plus, we were really close friends, so I was really happy to bring him on to a project. Worst decision I ever made. I'm not going to say that he lied to me about being on any TV and film stuff, but I just don't think he actually ever really had been on any TV and film stuff, because he didn't handle the set of doing a feature film like he would handle a set of doing his events. They're completely different. For instance, on a film set, you actually need to study your shots ahead of time. You get a shot list. I prepared extensive shot list. In fact, I did something called previs, where I did a pre-visualization of every single shot in the entire feature film. I actually made a feature film, like I made in animatronics the entire film before I made this one. I almost made it twice. So every day he would get dailies or a shot list, not dailies, but a shot list, but that shot list also was a video representation of the shots that I wanted. So the idea is that you show up on set and you know exactly what to shoot. Well, he didn't show up on set knowing what he should shoot. He just showed up on set. It was very unprofessional and he didn't know what he was doing. Obviously, by doing that, it slowed things down. He was just used to doing events where you just show up, as opposed to actually really doing TV and film stuff where there's preparation ahead of time. Another issue was because he was so used to doing events, what you do with events, you just kind of use your instincts, go around, shoot things. And if you're shooting like a wedding or a bat mitzvah or something like that, people are right down the center of the frame. They're right down, right in the middle. I know that we have talked about on this channel about people not being in the middle. I talked a little bit about the rule of thirds, which really isn't the rule of thirds. It's really the golden ratio. I'll try to make another video about that. Or actually what I'll do is maybe I'll link something, another video I made about the golden ratio in the description, so you can see what I'm talking about. But what he did is everything was right stinking in the middle. So what I had to do in post-production, every single shot, I had to punch in a little bit and reframe it. There was not a single shot in the feature film that I did that was done, that is on screen as it was shot, because he did such a poor job of framing. Even though he had a visual representation of how things were supposed to be framed, he still reverted back to what he was used to doing. And that's a lesson for people and for you and for everything else. People always revert back to what they're used to doing. Even if you tell them something, if they're in a tough situation, they revert back to their old instincts, especially when they've done things a whole lot of times. That's why you need to find people who are experienced doing what you want them to do. That was a huge mistake and a huge bummer. The other thing was, because he misshot so many of my shots, that only about half the footage was usable at the end of the day. It was such a bummer. So at the end of the day, I ended up having to bake a cake with half the ingredients. I ended up having to make a feature film out of only really half the shots that I needed. I made it work, but the end result was not something that I wanted. It wasn't what I had scripted. It was not what I spent all that time prevising. He really messed everything up. It was really a disaster. And ultimately, it's my fault, because I can blame him, but I was the one who hired him. So really, the buck has to stop with you. And unfortunately, it was my fault. Guys, pay very close attention to who you hire to work with you. Make sure that they're just not your friends. It's better to work with someone who's a complete stranger, who knows what they're doing, than a friend who can mess stuff up. And that's what had happened. And we are no longer friends to this day because he did such a poor job. So what I would recommend to you is to not watch my feature film, because I was not happy with how that turned out, because it's not the film that I wrote, and it's not the film that I directed and planned out ahead of time. It's something very different, and every time I see it, I just see lost opportunities. And a lot of times when people put reviews on it, things that they say, make total sense, and I'm not there to tell them what happened. They only see it for its face value. Not really happy with how it turned out. However, and this is the big however, of the 50% of the shots I was able to save, I was able to pull together a director's reel. This director's reel shows my eye for composition, how I shoot things, how I put and compose things together. And so my director's reel was pretty strong. In fact, it's so strong that actually after I had shot this film, or actually directed this project, this director's reel, the one we're about to watch, was picked out of 500 submissions to direct another feature project. In other words, 500 other directors submitted their reels, and mine was picked as the top one. So while my feature film wasn't that great, the director's reel I was able to get out of it was pretty good. And again, we can always get better. It's a good place to start. Hopefully I'll continue to improve and improve and improve and improve as we go along. But I wanted to go through with you today because it'd be interesting to see and go through some of these shots that I always talk to you about, and you can see some things that I have done. So let's check this out together, shall we? And action. By the way, you're going to hear some of the music from the soundtrack that I wrote. You see, it's music written, performed by me. That soundtrack is free and available to any of you if you want to download it for free. I put a link in the video that was my 10K subscriber video. So if you're interested in the soundtrack, feel free to download it for free if you like any of the music. All I ask is that you just reference back to me and give me credit for the music if you use it, but it's free for you guys. So this is a slider shot that's going across. So what I'm doing is I'm scanning across the bottles, show the bottles, and then there's an alarm going off, and I show when I'm moving into action. So I'm going from bottles and establishing, moving into action, where you see a hand stopping the clock as it goes off.
Nathaniel Hawthorne said.
Now you notice how the actor's name is Chris. You notice how it's on a jib underneath him, and everything, it's a bird's eye, it's turning counterclockwise. The idea is that he's living in the past, and so like everything's kind of going backwards, and so there's movement because he's thinking, and he's just living in the past. Moving counterclockwise. Moving into action, tracking shot. A series of inserts are coming up. Insert, insert,
behind.
Insert. Now, this time I put him dead center in the frame. And the reason is because before he wasn't dead center. So this is purposeful. So when you put people dead center of the frame once in a while, it stands out. If they're in the dead center of the frame, it doesn't stand out. It's kind of like that quote from The Incredibles. If everybody's special, nobody is. And so the thing is you have to choose if you want to do dead center of the frame, there's a reason for it. And there's a reason for it. First time that we actually see him getting all ready, and he's ready to go after he's gotten ready, and his head is down and his back is to you, which creates now we're not going to be able to see in the shot. I don't know why I didn't include this in the reel, but there's a racked focus here, and so right now you see Chris's face in focus, and then in the shot we actually rack focus to his family. It's not in the reel here, but that's actually what happens.
But what if...
Now you notice this lighting in the background. I blew this out a little bit, and he's in shadow. So I want to show just this him in darkness, blasting with light in the background.
That shadow is the only...
What I'm doing is I'm tracking across from the bottle to the gun. So you don't actually see the gun to start with. The gun's over on this side of the frame. Bottle tracking over to there's a gun in the shadows.
Is the only light you have left. And everything else is just a greater darkness.
Low angle shot, looking up them, kind of the God shot. You notice there's splitting frame. There was a high shutter speed on that. Did you see it? So here we are, this shot, we're panning down, and in the extreme foreground you see a body. The idea is that I want to make every frame like a picture, Like I wanted to make every frame very visually stunning. So the idea is in the old days, there was, when people used to have photos done of themselves, or not photos, like paintings done of themselves, there wasn't a TV, there were no actually photographs. So that one painting they had commissioned, which was very expensive, it said everything they needed to say. So everything in that painting, in that frame, meant something. Who was in the painting with that person? Was a dog in the painting where their eye line was? And so I look at this the same way. Everything in this frame actually says something. Tracking shot, it's on a gimbal. This is on a crane. It's establishing into these people walking in the woods. Now this is an important shot here. This is also done on a crane. So while they're walking here, there's actually a crane that's swinging around the ground to get this low shot of them walking. So because the crane is sort of on an arc, they had to kind of walk sort of on an arc to look like they're walking straight. Now why this is important, why did I take a picture of their feet, or why did I shoot their feet? It's because this little girl, you see her and her mom are walking together right there. She's a little ahead of her mom. But what you're gonna see in this shot is she's falling behind because she's limping. She's not doing very well, so watch. So now she's falling behind and her mom's going in front of her. So it's trying to say things visually, visual storytelling, to communicate something. It's also a wipe, not a very good wipe, but it's a wipe. Here the camera is basically on the ground looking through the grass to create that separation extreme. So we have foreground, they're in the middle ground, and then there's background. I'm going to skip through these action scenes because the action scenes aren't that great. The reason why the action scenes aren't great is we didn't have a lot of time. So in action scenes, usually to make them really good, is that you need to take a lot of shots. So what happens is that you take, something happens, then you take reaction shots. You take it from a bunch of different angles. It takes a lot of time to do them. These, we didn't have a lot of time, and it's one way you can tell that you don't have a lot of budget or a lot of time to do it is you don't have a lot of shots for reaction sequences. I do like this shot though, where he jumps into frame. This is a very famous shot that people loved. This shot of the actress, her name's Lexi, walking along the ground. There's dead bodies around her, and look at the lighting from the fire and the candles. And again, it's tracking along with the crane right along the ground. Again, this is panning into movement. Like, no one told me to do this. This is just something instinctually I want to do. So when I pan over something, you want to pan into and then end on movement. So here, you may not notice, but background, you can kind of see there's a person in the background that says police on their jersey. I'm sorry, on their jacket. So we're panning across, there's someone in the background. And the reason why this is colored like it is because it's actually a dream sequence. Or not a dream sequence, it's something in the past. And so it's colored like different, has a different filter on it. And so we're panning across the dead body into movement of another cop bending down. So you have someone in the cop in the background, in the foreground, someone leaning down over a body in the foreground. Crane shot. Again, following her feet. Why? So we can see the breaking of the ankle. Right there. Tilt up.
Well, maybe it's just God's way of clearing us out. Starting over.
It's one of my favorite shots. So you don't see the entire shot because only part of it is in the reel. So what happened is that this the character Hawes, he was more on this side, and the other character behind him, Alex, was more on this side. So then we panned and used Hawes' head as a wipe.
Well, maybe it's just God's way of clearing us out.
And now we end up on this shot. So these two people are at odds. So this person, like, they're partners, but they don't like each other. So Hawes is looking straight out. You see his profile, and then you see Alex, his profile. So they're both looking different directions, and his back is to Hawes, which it creates what? It creates distance. And you see they're on different sides of the screen, so there's physical distance in between them. Not only is there distance horizontally, there's distance vertically this way, not vertically but on the other axis as far as depth goes, and they're looking opposite directions, and his back is to him. Everything I did was framed specifically for a reason.
That sounds about right for Nazareth.
360 shot. Color's kind of off in that.
Hell right now.
I love doing things like that with extreme darkness, like again, contrast, like it's dark and then these lights shining through the room. Like if there was more of that shot, you'd see more people follow him in and more lights flashing across this dark room. But it's only just a part of it. Again, extreme foreground with a background going right across the feet. I like that shot. All this stuff here is actually not in the air. I did this all in post-production, this myself. So all these little particles that are floating in the air aren't really there. This is a Steadicam. Or a gimbal. Time-lapse. Now what we're doing is we're seeing somebody sitting in the woods and we're not sure who they are. So we're pushing into them, but we're pushing into them through bodies. So we're pushing into people's bodies. And now we're exiting a scene the opposite way. It's not the same scene, it's different. So they're looking at a dead body tied to this tree here. And then they're gonna go to the hospital, but we're exiting the scene this way. We're coming out of the scene through people. This is a very famous shot that people really liked. You don't see the person, which creates mystery. That's Lexi again, she's squatting down. You see this character here lying down, and all you see is you see these legs. She was a dancer, obviously, because she has just, you know, really strong legs, well-toned. And it just gives this really cool look right here in terms of, like, creates mysteries, like, who is this person? And that's the whole idea. We don't actually know who she is right now. Again, framing. There's actually a body hanging here, and you see the rope and everything, and these two people in the background, and they're dead center in the frame. Why did I put them in the center of the frame? I might have forgotten to move them. I can't remember why. Now you're going to notice my style. What I do again, I do a lot with foreground, background. So here's someone walking and it reveals him in the background. So check it out again. Extreme foreground, and then there's a reveal in the background. So you don't see him to begin with in the original shot. In the original shot, we start a little further back, so you don't see him, you just see her walking. And then as she walks, there's a reveal of him in the background. This is done in a car. There's actually driving. There's a rig on the outside watching her, watching her. There's a camera on the outside on a rig filming her. And the pull-out I did in post-production. So here's some action sequences. Again, they're kind of That blood splatter there was done in post-production, shooting those guys with wolf masks on their face. Now, what do you notice about this? Remember I talked before about when you do a lot of fast cuts and people are all at different angles, it shows like a confused state of mind. Well, this guy is like super angry. Something happened. He's thinking about the past, like this tragic event. So, bam, one direction, another direction, another direction, another direction. So this very jolting. It's a very jolting editing, but it's done specifically for a reason. I wanted to show his fractured state is this way, and he's this way, and he's this way. And I not only did do that with the direction he was facing, but I did it with like where he was framed. You know, here, he's a close-up, there's a mid, and now another mid. Again, you see typically my style of things, extreme close-up, extreme foreground, and background, something happening in the background. Bird's eye. It's on the floor. This is a really cool shot people like too. So this shot here was done on a slider. Here's a body, and these are all the detectives, and they just fill the frame. You see how there's no wasted space? And what I'm doing is I'm showing all the people on the scene. You're gonna see Hawes back here taking pictures, but it's revealing, here's the body, and we're seeing what everybody's doing, but they're all filling the frame. And it's a very unusual shot because it's on an angle because the hillside is a little sloped and because it shows that things are off, sort of a Dutch angle, but you see everybody and they're filling the frame. Sorry, that wasn't Hawes, that was somebody else. All these particulates are not there, I added those. All this stuff in the air, I added. Desaturate that on purpose, that was a memory. Again, I just love this, like this contrasting light. It's dark, and this light coming through the hallway, and this person standing up in silhouette, and that's a God shot looking up at that person. There's a reason why. He's the boss of all the other detectives, and so he's very powerful. He just found something that made him really mad. He's about to make a phone call. Walking into a church, there's a bit of a slider going on here to create a little movement. This is a this is a crane looking down a bird's eye on her. The reason why did I do that shot? Because she's holding something in her hand that we don't see until now, which is, probably can't tell, but it's a turtle. Drone shot. Leaving a scene. So when I left this scene here, I left it with this framing. Alex is framed in this window. So we're leaving the scene, but we're leaving the scene just seeing him framed in the window in that light and darkness. I like this shot too. She's in the foreground. In the background, she sees her mom carrying her dog. The dog's sick, and so she has to put it down. Here's an example, guys, of a very boring house. So this is why your locations are very important. So you have these beautiful outside locations, but look how boring this looks. It's a plain wall, just as regular things that everyone has in their homes on the windows. You need to pick your locations out very well so they're very interesting. It just happened to be in this room in this house, tended to be a little bit plain. So if you can pick your stuff out well, then you don't have to have the art department come in and change a lot of stuff. You want things to really say something. This is one of the very few places that didn't say very much. I tried to pick out my location specifically that you could. It's just very hard to find very interesting rooms in people's homes. Everyone wants their place to look nice instead of like terrible. See, just an ordinary room would have been better to have something a little creepier looking. Great. So guys, that was my directing reel. I talked you through the shots. I hope you like some of it. Maybe you think you could do some of it better. Maybe you could. But anyways, that's a place to start. And hopefully I just get better and better. But I figured since we talked so much about coming from a director's point of view, I would show you some things that I've done. So guys, for a film director talks about his own directing reel, it's a wrap.